All right, everyone. Tech stocks yesterday took another beating. It wasn't just Twitter and Facebook. Virtually all the others were down. I think Netflix was down like 2 points. Google was down 1.5 points. I think Amazon close to that. Alibaba was down a couple points. So there was a bit of contagion, I guess, across the entire tech sector. But the big loser was Twitter. It lost another 8% of its total value. And this is in addition to losing over 20% before stocks closed for the last weekend. So they got hammered and they lost billions of dollars. Then they got hammered and lost billions of dollars again. Facebook followed suit as well. It was down as much as 5%. Ended up down around 2.5% by the end of the day. But still, a continued loss from a company that already hemorrhaged almost a quarter of its total stock value in a single day. It's phantasmagoric when you really think about it. These are two of the biggest tech firms, and combined they lost tens of billions of dollars in value in the span of the first 24 hours, and considerable numbers of billions yesterday as well, and there's no indication that it's going to stop. What you'll probably see, this is my worry, is that Twitter and Facebook will form, again, what I've referred to as a bull trap. It's basically after a short sell-off, it begins to rise back up and people clear the sweat from their brows. Whew, oh, thank goodness that's over. It was a minor correction. And they don't realize that the worst is definitely yet to come. Bitcoin had this happen. When this happened, some time ago, I correctly predicted that and said, yeah, don't worry, it's not going to collapse right now when it started to drop the first time. Wait a few weeks or months, and lo and behold, I think it was, 3 weeks later, it begins its catastrophic drop, and I believe is still dropping now. It's going to continue for a while. It's going to correct itself fully. The bubble has popped. The crypto bubble popped. All the crypto started a massive loss. Now, unfortunately, with cryptocurrency, it's a little different because a new one will just crop up and then it starts the whole cycle over. So it's a lot more chaotic and difficult to gauge what the fuck's going to happen. If I had to guess, I'd say today or tomorrow or sometime, Twitter and Facebook, their stocks will stagnate and stabilize. And then eventually, some weeks or months later, the bottom will drop out again. This happened to the Chinese markets, I think it was 3 years ago, actually, where they dropped, I think, 8% in a day. They kind of recovered for a couple days, and then I think they lost, 15-20% off some of their markets. And then thereafter, for like an entire week, it kept sliding. The real reason for this, though, is fairly clear. Unlike with Google, unlike with Amazon, unlike with a lot of these other tech firms, and lost a little, like Microsoft or something, Facebook and Twitter simply are not doing well as companies. Facebook is no longer gaining users. Twitter is losing users. Facebook is stagnant, which is why their sell-off today wasn't as large, even though it was larger before. That was partially due to privacy scandals, but now Twitter thinks that the solution to their problems is hiring PR people and HR people and task forces to crack down further and censor the site even more. It's not going to work. People ultimately, at the end of the day, even people who are left-leaning don't want a heavily censored internet. It's very funny, on the 3D printing thing, a lot of these states, run by neoliberals generally, they're trying to crack down on the same free and open internet they rambled about like morons for months with regards to net neutrality. Now all of a sudden they're like, oh no, net neutrality be banned. We should be able to tell sites what kind of data they can offer to people. Oh my god, this chunk of data turns into a gun potentially if you put it in the right machine. Therefore it should be banned. Oh my god, the Trump administration is acting evilly. And Trump, by the way, has paid lip service to looking into the situation. My hope is that he doesn't actually attempt to stop that from happening. My goodness, it'd be terrible. By the way, I would oppose Trump severely on that. It's a Second Amendment and a Fourth Amendment issue. And a First Amendment issue when you think about it. The right to distribute data, yeah, you should absolutely have that. Yeah, the Anarchist Cookbook can teach you how to do all sorts of things that are potentially illegal, but the book itself is not illegal. In digital or print form, there's a reason for that. The book itself is not a weapon. The book itself is not an explosive. These pieces of data are not themselves guns. They don't even produce guns. They produce receivers or other components. Individually, they're fucking useless. It's not going to do anything. By the way, people can mill their own receivers anyway with the manual parts. What the fuck's the point of trying to ban this? Most 3D printers that are going to be able to do anything with these plans are inordinately expensive anyway for the kind of people you would generally worry about. Like, oh, little Jimmy's 12. I'm sure that he's going to spend a couple grand on the 3D printer and the parts, download the data, and he's actually going to have the expertise to work all this stuff. I don't think so. Maybe But then again, fucking little Jimmy can also grab his dad's .32 revolver. So, I'm not too fucking worried about little Jimmy at this point. But Facebook and Twitter think that the answer to their problems is to sell more data overseas, like Facebook selling it to Chinese firms directly. It didn't even accidentally get into the hands of foreign nations' companies that share their data with the government by default because the government can get any data it wants at a whim. The Chinese government can tell any company in China, we want X, Y, and Z. They can't resist. There's no legal repercussions, even if it's totally corrupt what they're asking for. This firm in China that Zuckerberg sent Facebook users' data to, by now has definitely given it to the Chinese government. They've absolutely gotten copies of that data. Absolutely. I'm sure it's in other countries too. You wait, the scandal will get bigger with regards to Zuckerberg's privacy features. Zuckerberg couldn't even answer Congress. He wasn't even under oath at the time. He still wouldn't answer with a straight face how long Facebook retains user data after a person closes their account. You know why? Because it's forever. They don't delete it. It never gets overridden. It never gets deleted because it's very valuable. What they do is they put it on a fucking flash drive somewhere and get it off the main servers. That's all they do. That's what they do because they can keep selling that same data over and over to company after company. They sell it to a company under a contract that doesn't allow that company to share it with anyone else. It's only for their singular use, and there are certain restrictions with how they store and use it. Then they can sell it again and again and again, and the data is really valuable. One person's data is like, 10 cents. What if you have 100 million people's data? Wow, that's a lot of money. And you can sell it over and over again. More and more companies exist every day, both here and abroad, and they all want that data for advertising purposes. Because targeted ads generally bring a higher return than non-targeted ads. So Google does this too. Google targets ads, only they use their own internal data because they're the biggest search engine. They don't have Facebook's problem. They don't need to sell it to people. No, they use it for their own advertising purposes. They're the ones, they micromanage it all. By the way, Google is a little bit less dubious when it does this than Facebook is literally selling your data in bundles to foreign firms. As for Twitter, Twitter is losing users. Once a site begins organically to decline, it doesn't do well. The stock will collapse. Twitter's doomed. Twitter's going to die as a company. It's going to become a Yahoo or something. I can guarantee you that happens. All the government intervention in the world's not going to save them at this point because what is Twitter? Twitter ultimately is an ego trip for a lot of people. Well, if Twitter is no longer cool, if the cool kids aren't signing up and their user base is starting to decline, it's no longer cool. It'll become a downward spiral, a little snowball. What will happen now that people know that Twitter is more censored, lacks basic privacy protections, is going to get more censored and less private, is going to become possibly less functional and is losing users and stock value, everyone under the sun's going to have a reason to leave it. It'll be like Facebook. It'll be a slow process. At first, it'll only be a few people leaving. But then, because they're banning users, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if more people are signing up than leaving the site or dying and becoming inactive. It doesn't matter because they keep banning millions of people. They ban what? Several million people a month off their platform because they're the most censored fucking website in history? Yeah, really, really great strategy considering that those are the people that interact with everyone else and form the sort of symbiotic systems you need for your site to remain healthy. They're sitting there talking about how to inject health into conversations. You don't even know how to run a healthy website, Jack. It's never gonna work. Twitter will die. It'll go into a long, slow, ignominious decline and slowly get subsumed by other sites. Now, there's one wild card here, and that's this. The big tech firms have a de facto trust in which they can exclude smaller, like for instance, Gab, I believe, doesn't have an app, specifically because it can't have an app. Google won't let it on their app store or anything. When people tell me, like, hey, it's not a monopoly or a trust or whatever because you can, do your own thing, you can build your own website, you need more than a website. You also need to have your own phone line. You need to have a partnership with service providers. You need your own domain registrar. You'd need your own funding platform. You'd need your own Cloudflare style site. You would need to have a miniaturized version of the entire internet in order to crack these corporate monopolies, which is what they are. It's worse than a monopoly. Google's not a monopoly. No, there are other search engines that people use. WordPress is a perfectly acceptable alternative to Blogspot. There are video hosting sites that are technically perfectly viable alternatives to YouTube. No, Google's not a monopoly. In no sense do they completely control any particular market. Amazon's not a monopoly. There are other self-publishing services. There are other places you can do. You can do e-commerce on eBay. You can do e-commerce on Lulu or whatever, or that or Alibaba. It's not a monopoly. It's a huge. It's the closest to a monopoly, but it's not. Twitter's not a monopoly. Gab. Minds is a social media network, although it's semi-separate, semi-different. Facebook's not a monopoly. Minds is certainly a perfectly viable alternative to that, and by the way, I far prefer it. You should join me on Minds. Leave the Facebook group alone. If you're on the Facebook group, just fucking leave it. Who gives a shit about it? It's basically just a placeholder. The problem is that in order to actually compete with these sites, in order to actually be fully viable, you need the level of interconnectivity they have. They've already formed a trust. They don't compete with one another in their little areas. Why do you think Amazon, I don't think, has yet implemented a video hosting service? It's basically an unspoken agreement with not competing with Google at that point. Why do you think Google shafted G+? It wasn't just because it was dysfunctional. It's because, hey, I was eating into Facebook a little bit. Why, Facebook video. About the closest thing to actual competition going on there. And since they're dying as a platform, it really doesn't matter now, does it? They're a trust. Well then, don't talk about capitalism. Don't talk about the free market. It's not a free market. You'd need $1 billion in order to create the number of specific sub-companies you'd need and services you'd need just to have a presence that could potentially compete with them. And you'd be starting from the bottom. Be kind of difficult now, wouldn't it? So don't tell me about how alt tech should stop complaining about the fact that they are continuously abused by registrars, by search engines, by every existing corporate site. Because that's not a fair argument to make. It's not capitalism. It's cronyism. It's also government tied. Look, the government services use Twitter for disaster alerts. Police use Twitter and stuff. Those are public services, taxpayer paid. Not capitalism. That's an oligarchic sort of plutocratic approach. Government already uses these sites. They should be public utilities. By the way, some people are pointing out, oh, Amazon's trying to force the government to render these sites into de facto monopolies, basically intervening in them in order to squish out their competitors. Yeah, good point, but I mean, the thing is, what alternative is there? Constitutional amendment would have to be passed. Do you think anyone in Congress right now, other than Rand Paul, has the balls to do that? I don't think so. I think they're totally fucking spineless. They won't even stand up to European censorship laws. Ted fucking Cruz, he stands up for free speech. He's like, well, no, Twitter shouldn't be policing speech and stuff. And it's like, yeah, now you say something. Yeah, now 2 years after the fucking election, when they were already starting to censor everyone who disagreed with neoliberalism, now you opine. Now you say something. Rand Paul was already talking about it. Trump was talking about it. Handful of so-called progressives were talking about it. Some of the walk-away progressives, anyway. You didn't say anything. No, you wanted people to be censored during the election because it'd be people who were on your side. They're not the ones that are going to get targeted because they're very mainstream neocons and evangelocons. They didn't have anything to worry about. Now, Twitter and Facebook are basically doomed, which is good. Good riddance, especially to Facebook. Facebook is an abusive site. It's also a shitty site. It's not run properly anymore. It's not fun. People use it for Messenger. They message a handful of people in their inner circle. What else do they do there? Scroll, 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 scroll. Oh, I'm going to click share on this one. It's fucking stupid. That's about all. Peace out.